Although smart objects were introduced in Photoshop CS2, there are still some users reluctant to use it, mainly because they can't see the potential of working with smart objects. For those who are new to Photoshop, of course it's completely different because everything is new, so you just need guidance to understand how to do things properly. In this video I'm going to start talking about these advantages, but I'm going to also further explain it in the following videos. So first and foremost, how do we create a smart object? Well, we already talked about this in previous videos, that you right click on a layer and then choose Convert to Smart Object. And once you do that, if that layer had a mask on it, like this layer has a vector mask, that vector mask will be embedded into the smart object. Let me explain this to you. So once I choose Convert to Smart Object, that now wraps together the original image and its mask. So we can't access it directly, but we will be able to access it later on. But for now, what I would like to do is to resize this layer. So Command or Control T for free transform, Shift drag one of the corners, and let's say we want to put the elephant a little bit further back in the background, somewhere there, or maybe somewhere around here. It's up to us where we want to place it. But once we tried how it looks in the background and we realized that it's actually not that good, it was better when it was closer to us, then if you choose free transform again, the great thing is that it will remember the original quality. The image quality is still there, and when I'm resizing it here on the top, I can see exactly when I go beyond the original size. Up to 100%, I will have always perfect quality based on the original image, the source of this smart object, which we can access if we double click on the thumbnail of the smart object. So double clicking on that will open up the embedded smart object source file, which opens up as a separate tab, and it will always be a PSB file, which is the Photoshop big document file format. And this file is saved within the Photoshop document, the mountain path. So it's a file within a file. We won't be able to find this PSB on our document, so it's not in the same folder or anything like that. It's simply saved within the other file. Once we are in the source, we can make changes, for example, to the mask. If we feel like the mask is not good, we can select that and use selections and adjust it, or even shift click on the mask to see the original background, and so on and so forth. You can imagine there's so many things we can do here. Maybe if we want to retouch a detail, like on the ear, if we want to remove the mud from that, we can create a separate layer for that. Use the spot healing brush tool, reduce the size, and if you have sample all layers, you will be able to do this on the separate layer. Let's just paint over these details like that. So now that we updated the image, we can call this layer as well retouch. And notice that I'm creating multiple layers within the smart object. You can even have adjustment layers here. And just to prove that, I'm going to add levels. And I'm going to increase contrast 3, just to add a bit more contrast on the elephant. And then if I go to the file menu and save this, then it will update in my main document. Just to show you, if I switch back to that, currently we still see the same version of the elephant, so we can tell by the mud on the ears. But if I go back to the smart object's source, and then I save this, so I go to File, Save, then in the main document it will also update. So we can see the increased contrast and also the retouch on the ear. If I press Undo here, I can see before and after. So I don't even have to go to the source of the smart object to go back and forth. I can even see the changes from within the main document. There are some Photoshop users who use smart objects not only because it allows them to save the original size of a certain image, but also to organize their file structure. So for instance, here we have only one layer for the elephant, but once we double click on that, we can access the retouch layer and all the adjustments we applied on the elephant. So it's a way of organizing your work and keep changes and adjustments for certain layers within smart objects. But that's not all the advantage of working with smart objects. So let me go back to the main image and zoom back a bit. So we have this balloon here, which is already a smart object, as you can see. Here in the layers panel, I can see that is a smart object. And by the way, if you have multiple smart objects, you can always filter for them by clicking on the filter option here in the layers panel, which will only be available if you have CC. But once you click on that, you can see we can very quickly find how many smart objects we have in a document. I will turn this option off just to see everything once again. And having the balloon selected and using free transform by pressing Command or Control T, I can check what's the size of that balloon. I can make it smaller as well. And as long as I'm below 100% or maximum 120%, I should be fine with the quality of that layer. But what I wanted to show you also as a reminder is that if you do rotation and then accept the rotation, that is another thing that Smart Object will remember. So when I go back next time, I can easily reset this to 0 degrees. Another interesting technique is that if you duplicate a Smart Object, they will actually share the same source file. So in case of this balloon, if I Alt-click and drag and have a duplicate on the other side, and I just make this smaller maybe, and maybe I could even flip it around by dragging one of the sides and holding down Alt or Option. I can turn it around, so flip it horizontally. So now we have two versions of the same balloon, but if I double click on one of the Smart Objects thumbnails and make some change here, it will appear on both of these instances of the Smart Object. So let's just try, for example, the hue saturation adjustment layer and drag hue around just to change the colors of the balloon. Maybe something like that. So now if I save this change, I go to File, Save, and go back to the original image, then we can see not only the one on the left or the right change, but both of them, because that adjustment layer is within the source, and that source is shared between these two smart objects. Of course, you can duplicate a smart object and have a separate source for it. In case you want to do that, you have to right-click and choose New Smart Object via Copy. So that's a separate option there. If I do that, I will have now a third version, which I will keep in the middle. And if I double-click on this and delete the hue saturation adjustment layer, or even I could just hide it and save this, going back to the original file, now we can see that the original colors came back here. If I go into the other smart objects, and maybe instead of using hue saturation, we will add black and white, just to see a drastic difference, save that, and go back again to our main image, we can see that the black and white effect will only apply to the smart objects that share their source. I am going to delete these black and white versions, so I just press backspace, backspace, and then we keep this one here. And that was all I wanted to show you in this first video about smart objects, but there's plenty more to talk about. In the next video, I will explain what is a vector smart object.